Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few of us get together, random strangers, and we make a story for you, another random stranger. I am, of course, Random Stranger 1, Levi.
Random Stranger 2, Reed.
I'm Random Stranger 3, Seth.
Perfect. We are here to tell you a story. Starting off new, what story elements did you guys have? I had history.
Well, not too new. Mine is sequel.
Oh, perfect.
And I have economic system.
Now, did we determine that the sequel was going to be a sequel of the story we just completed, The Music of the Spheres, or of any of our previous stories?
Any of our previous stories. Isn't that the way you remember it, Seth?
I thought of that as an option to it.
Cool.
Well,
I'm not sure if that was laid in stone, but I think that would be a good way to do it.
Since I drew the straw, shall we say, that way we do it? Draw straws?
Yeah, since you got that story element, you get to decide.
Yes, and I decided it could be of any. And I look back at recently we've been in a little bit of a rut where we'll do, 3 and sometimes even 4 episodes on filling out the same story, which is really cool and everything. But I just, I was thinking about that and I looked back through the last couple of notebooks, and they were all kind of on that mode of building on each other.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, let me just look back and see. And I just clicked I went on one of the podcast sites that you can find us on. And you can find us on just about, if you've got a favorite podcast site, chances are you can find us there.
Yeah.
But in any case, I just clicked the little thingy where I clicked episodes, and then there was a little thing that had a graphic, and that was like thick bars, a little bit thinner bars, a little bit thinner, going down to a little tiny bar. And I just clicked that and it flipped it over, which started from the beginning.
Oh, perfect.
So what we have here is a sequel to episode number 7, a little more than 4 years ago. It's one of my very favorite episodes and one of the best titles for any episode ever, called Top Hat of Destiny.
Oh, perfect. You should give us a little bit of a synopsis.
Yeah, we're going to have a little recap here because, what I would really honestly recommend is to just pause right here and go back and find episode number 7 and listen to it, because it's really fun. Just saying. Levi had this story element of villain's sidekick. And essentially what happened, my story element was story theme, which was space pirate. And the way we got going, we called our space pirate Jake, and it was a world where mankind had, headed to the stars. And
right.
They discovered that there was a layer of space that they could enter using a hyperspace drive, so they could achieve faster than light speed, so they could, head out. It wasn't instantaneous, but it opened up a great deal more options for exploration and settling and whatnot. And they'd been merrily on their way, just carrying on like this. And because of the great distances involved, most of the activity centered around the Earth and the more closely inhabited planets that were most developed and most built up and whatnot. And then the farther out you go, the less kind of contact you had, and you had kind of like cowboy stuff going on out there.
Yeah, the boonies.
Yeah, but we'd run across worlds with with life, developing life, but nothing sentient. And so we were pretty much alone. Well, then we had some space raiders, which it wasn't like an invasion of the bad guys. It was just like these guys would just pop in and cripple a freighter and steal all their stuff and then take off. And there was a space force, and whenever there was a confrontation, the problem is these space raiders, this alien, attacked this entity that was invading our little party. Observers would say, well, they just winked out. It wasn't like going into hyperspace. They just wink out of existence.
Yeah.
Well, our space pirate Jake, and I think we called him the villain, but because he played a little fast and loose with the rules, and he was out kind of more in the outer rim where there was less, a little more anarchy, a little more, as the spirit moves you going on. And he
Right.
had a great ship. It was one of these over-engineered freighters that could stand up to just about anything space could throw at it. And he had been up gunning the thing over time, just in case, some trouble, especially when the first reports of these space raiders came out. Well, he managed to get the drop on one of these space raiders, cripple their mech, clipper, crippled their mechanisms enough so they went down on a planet. And he was able to follow him down, like finish off the bad guys because there was something of a crash, and like he and his boys just like ripped the thing apart, and they figured out how this winking out happened. And there was like a third layer. So you have regular space, you have, the layer where you slip into in
subspace or
hyperdrive.
hyperspace.
Right. And then there was a third layer that you could just wink into and then wink back, as long as your ship's computer knew where you were and where you wanted to end up. It was
Right.
it had that limitation, but it was these space raiders, they could pop in, do their stuff, and then just pop out to a safe haven that they knew about. And they were, so piracy was kind of the order of the day, and order was kind of breaking down because, here we had the party all to ourselves for, hundreds of years. Well, anyway, I'll try to make this short. So he's kicking around. He goes into like what appears to be like central command or the commander's quarters or whatever. And he finds on one of their raids, they must have like hit an old museum or something, because they had like some clothes like you would think you would see like an old early 20th century fancy party with really, fancy people. Like, there was like a full set of dress clothes, like top hat, tails, waistcoat, and
Right.
the leather loafers with the spats and the whole, the whole setup. And he puts on, so Jake pops that old fashioned felt top hat on.
Why not?
And he hears in his brain, "Hello there. Are you my new master?" Well, it turns out that this was an artificial intelligence that was able to track the way this winking in and winking out technology worked, and he interacted directly with Jake's brain so that they could work everything and transfer all that technology to his ship, plus all their armaments. So all of a sudden, you had this clunky old looking freighter that was like the most gunned up, most technological
right. The
thing
top dog.
The top dog. And he just, not only could he deal with any time some of these aliens popped in, not only could he deal with them, with his instantaneous connection with the top hat, his sidekick, so to speak. He could just about pull off any job in the universe. There was another factor that was going on during this time, unbeknownst really to Jake. Maybe he knew, maybe he didn't care. But whenever you popped in or popped out of this third layer, it was doing damage to that layer. And the intelligence that inhabited that third layer, Top Hat had hitched a ride with these aliens as soon as they figured out what they were doing. And there was Jehovan was a captain of, shall we say, the authorities. He was in, what did I call him? He was in the Space League Marshal Service, and his job was to like track down these aliens. Originally, Jake wasn't even on their radar; they were just trying to deal with the aliens. But anyway, he in one encounter, so to speak, came across some of these clothes, and he picked up a pair of gloves. I believe what had happened is that Jake had tried some of the other pieces of clothes that hadn't worked, and that had like hawked them. And they were real interesting. So he had like old fashioned kid gloves, really soft, supple leather gloves. And these gloves were from the same layer of space. And they managed to make the AI made a brain connection. This Captain Jehovan was compatible. But this guy, the gloves were real interested in stopping what Top Hat was doing because he was doing all kinds of damage. Because Jake was all about, he was a pirate, he was a adventurer, he would take, great risks. And sometimes when the the feds were onto him, so to speak, he would wink out like in the atmosphere and just leave behind destruction. I mean, it was a bad scene.
I'm starting to remember this now.
Yeah, and little by little, Top Hat had this great connection with Jake's brain, and little by little was taking over to the point where, you know, Top Hat stopped being the villain's sidekick and started being the villain, and Jake was just like the host of an artificial intelligence. It wasn't a corporeal, um, flesh and blood organism, but it was, it was this association.
Yeah,
And-
wasn't it like it was like a creature from that other place that
Yeah.
had like come over
Yeah,
and it was trying to get more of itself over? Was that like
Right.
its end result?
yeah, and so he ended up really pretty much taking over Jake, and the result was, as Jake got older, he kept Jake alive, like kept alive in a solution of half blood, half sodium salicylate. I mean,
Yeah.
it could get like, I have this picture of a laboratory with tubes and bubbling substances and whatnot. But anyway, he's keeping Jake alive because he's got this mind that is completely clicks with. And as we found out, Jake didn't click with the gloves at all. So he hawked them. But now here's where we're, so that's kind of the basic story where we left off with Top Hat of Destiny. And now we're on the 5th generation. Captain Confidence of Space League Marshal Service is the 5th generation to wear the gloves.
Okay.
And so so anyway, the gloves have had to continually look for a compatible match.
Right, and the gloves are good.
The gloves, well, yeah, and they just don't want the 3rd tier of space destroyed anymore, just because Top Hat wants to make a name for himself, so to speak.
Right, did the story end with Top Hat being defeated at all?
No, it kind of left it up like Jehovan was like always one step behind. He was able to track Top Hat, but he had lost his invincibility, but
right.
he could never quite catch up. It was always like Top Hat was like one step ahead, and then when because the gloves weren't able to make their connection with their host wasn't as complete as Top Hat's, as their host, so to speak, wore out, and they had to find another compatible host. Then Top Hat would
right
get away. So the way I'm picturing it in this story, and I don't know, you've got history, you'll have to fill it in. So here we find ourselves. Top Hat's pretty much squeezed all the juice he can out of Jake. I don't know, it's working, but I think he would really like to find a host. But the problem is finding that compatibility. And then now we've got the gloves. We got Captain Confidence is wearing the gloves. So how's that for a setup for a sequel?
How interesting. Okay, great. Seth, what did you have?
I had economic system.
Okay, I'm gonna go because I have history, and then you can go, and then we'll maybe lay some more world building stuff.
Yeah.
So my history was, because I knew Reed had sequel, so I knew I couldn't come up with something really elaborate. So the history is the past is a dream, right? That was like my baseline, what I was gonna go with. And so I think how this is gonna work is that we were just talking about fairies before we started in. So that's kind of where I think we're going to be going with this, is that more of these creatures via Top Hat's influence have made their way into our world, right? And they have begun to gaslight humanity, right? So
Cool.
they are basically, people have arisen in places of power. People have arisen in places of religious power, philosophy, who are espousing the idea that we live in a simulation, right? Through strategic editing of history, through strategic reframing of historical facts, they're trying to destabilize humanity to like collectively giving up. And now these creatures have been around for a long time. Even before we were out in space, we just didn't see them as much. People made deals with fairies, creatures from a different place that could do strange things for them, So this has been a thing for a while, but now here you said 5 generations since the last book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how many years is that? A generation's like 50 years?
Yeah, it depends on how you look at it.
40 or 60, depending.
Let's go with 50. That's
yeah.
easier.
I say 50 is the in between 40 and okay. Anyway, so that's 250 years has passed since Gloves. What's the Joven couldn't catch Top Hat and Jake. Right. And since then, the world. If you had been living in that day, you would have said, "Wow, the world's kind of falling. The society is kind of falling apart. Humanity is kind of like losing its way." Right? If you were to see the world now, you would say something like, "We're divided now more than ever."
Yeah.
There are these themes and these ideas that there's no such thing as the past. Enough people have been born in the black of space that it's questionable whether we actually came from Earth or not. Earth itself was lost. Like, not Earth, like we can't find the planet, but like none of the historical, you go back to quote unquote Earth, but none of the historical artifacts exist. There's no Egypt. There's no America. There's no England.
Like Earth civilization has kind of dwindled into myth, the mists of like,
or like through efficiency, like, and just reframing, it's just been changed. Just how like historical facts change over time. From the point in which they first happened to now, they change, and the longer it's separated away. I think about Lord of the Rings when, in the movies, anyways, when she talks about like when facts become legends and legends become myth, and then even myth passes away, or that's a Wheel of Time thing. It's like something that's real turns into a legend turns into a myth, and then even a myth fades away. That is what these creatures have been intentionally doing. Some of them. Gloves clearly no. And there's a faction of him there's a faction of his that have made their way over that are fighting, but they're less because they're less prone to cause the gates that destabilize their world.
Right.
And if I can just say a little bit of world building, my idea would be that they are another reality that is several million years farther along the path that we're going along, right?
Oh, so they've like come back to see if they could repair the damage before it starts?
No, it's not our reality. It's not the future. It's like how in Stargate, the Asgard, like through efficiency, quote unquote, of evolution and human cloning, destroyed their gene pool, and now they can't make more. They can't procreate naturally, and they're dying out because they gave in to this idea that there's no such thing as the past, and some of them are trying to claw back this thing, kind of like what's Superman's dad's name?
Jor-El,
kind of recognizes the folly of their ways, and maybe too late, but he was able to do something. That's what Gloves is kind of in the position of.
Yeah.
So that's the history, and as things kind of roll out, there's going to be a lot of conflict between groups of people, like, it just hit the news wires a couple of weeks ago that like this entire planet colony went dark, and they went to it and they found the entire planet colony had like done like a mass. They'd given up on being alive because they had sort of given over to this idea that they're living in a simulation, that there's no such thing as the past, that they can't, that it's not valuable to look back at because it's so broken and terrible, So kind of dark, but that's the history. So Seth, what's the economic system? How do these people who are struggling to have hope make and earn money?
Well, it might play into some of the more doom and gloom of it. But the economic system is set up where, whether this is, universe wide or it's picking up on different planets or different worlds, but the like everything is laid out for you. You're given like a stipend, but only to spend on the things that you're told to spend it on. You go where you're told to go. If they need someone to truck something across, well, you'll wake up in the morning and you'll have like, I'm thinking of like at the bank where they have those tubes that come out. And also, some of this is also inspired by the 1984.
Right. Right.
Where like he's at his work and then all those things come through the tube and it's like all his instructions and everything. And basically that's it. It gives you your, this is what you're doing today. You go here and maybe you'll pick up another one later on in the day, so that basically like the majority of people are getting less and less independently, I don't know if cognizant is the word, but like independent thinking,
right,
independent action,
right.
Like if they just don't give you a job, you basically sit at home and starve to death, right? Because then you weren't told to go buy food and you weren't given money to buy food,
right?
And so it's kind of if you're told to go, you'll get something in the morning, you need to go and talk to your neighbor and have a game of chess, and here is, money for bourbon and cigarettes. So you go get bourbon and cigarettes and you play, chess with your neighbor, and that's your interaction.
Right.
And so, but if you didn't, you're not being given that stipend or given, something to go do, you would just like sit at home and tap your, twiddle your thumbs, and stare at the wall until you're given the instructions. And so that's, that's kind of the base of it is, everything is kind of handed out at the beginning of the day or at different intervals, depending if whoever's, maybe you said these fairy things that are, kind of cracking down on,
right,
what people are doing.
Can I just say it's really positive in the Wait It Gets Better studio today.
Yeah, really I was just thinking. So I just wrote down here, personal initiative is eliminated. I mean, you have people like it's entirely a regulated society where they can control flow of resources because they can control consumerism. You don't that you are allowed to consume X. So in who's ever doing the planning can just all we have to produce for this person to consume is X. We don't have to anticipate supply and demand.
I was reading about a really kind of terrifying future where everyone works for the kind of Uber Eats, Uber economy. You just open up your app and they just say, go and pick up this thing and bring it here. And that's your job. And so you just go and do that. And then that's it. You have no, like you were saying, initiative or no, maybe it started like that, but the way Seth's saying, it's like much worse than that, that way they can control people. There's obviously resistance though to that, right, Seth?
I would think so. I mean, it's a vast place, but no, you talk about like different news stories, like, lots of different people could just, because I personally think this is what happens now, but maybe that's for the 4th episode. But certain groups of people are given the certain news that they need to see and then told to go talk about that certain news to the certain people that are going to agree with it, to then get those, whether it's happening or not, it's, that's what's given to you, and you're given, your stipend to get these certain things and do those certain things. They need a building built, and so they pick these people out and they go and do that, and then they go home, and then they could be truckers the next day, or they could be
Right.
Space Marines,
I can
fighting, what are those things, bugs,
yeah, I can see how this would start out light, like Uber and DoorDash and things like that,
Yeah.
right? It starts off low commitment, and also when you think about, if we're talking about like a multi-stellar, like an interstellar civilization, thousands of years, billions of people on a planet, the need to sort of organize people is much higher, like the need to know and be in control of people is much higher. You can't get a guy who just wants to go and live on his 40 acres in the forest somewhere, because he's an unknown factor, because he doesn't represent the kind of strength and stability you need to be able to have if you're going to field an army of 100 million people, if you're going to mine out planets for resources. It's like, that's really scary, but I think appropriate for the setting that we're in right now.
Like, one of the other things, and I don't know if anyone remembers that, it's not Bug's Life. A lot of people get it confused with Bug's Life, but that other one that came out right
Ants.
around the same time, the Ants. That's
Yeah.
the weird, like, I don't know, the whole movie was messed up. But one of the things in there is, as these ants are being born, they're all being assigned like that role in life.
Right. Yeah.
And so I was kind of I wasn't sure if he was going to do sequel on like last week's, but I could see how something like that if you had something like that figured out, if you were under, going to the last one, like under this certain sign, or kind of, of this certain genetic makeup, you'd be a good miner or a good soldier or good,
Right.
they'd already have that categorized inside of what you were then designed to do, and then put you there, and then you'd be in your room, and when they need you to do something, they give you the stipend and give you the instructions to go do it, and then you're already assigned to that
Yeah.
thing,
And
probably from birth.
you're not that far away, if you're going to do that, from actually creating, doing genetic manipulation of children in order to create the people to do the things you want. If you're going to determine what their life is going to be as they're born, I mean, you're 6 months 6 months away, 6 months, how do I say this, at their time of birth. If you're going to determine, then you might as well just determine what they're going to be 6 months before, and do a bunch of work so that the developing fetus turns into whatever you need it to be,
Well,
which
they
is
already have
horrifying to
some of
say.
that.
I say it like I say that like, of course that makes sense, but I mean, it's horrifying, but
Have you both read Brave New World?
I have not. I need to, though.
Yeah, no, I haven't, but
Yeah, well, yeah, way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
Huxley, um, they had the alphas, the betas, the alpha pluses were like unique individuals. Then you had the alphas and the betas and um, the gammas and the deltas and the epsilons. The epsilons were genetically programmed to literally be able to function on like maintenance and custodial kind of level. The deltas,
Right.
the deltas were mass produced in like like twins, only like batches of like 96 identicals.
Right.
And then they were plugged into factories and very regimented work. Then they were given they were addicted to a specific drug that had been a heroin type drug that had the bad effects, side effects filtered out over time. So they'd get off work and get high, and everybody was happy. Then they just plugged into their existence. And if you were a delta,
Right.
you were a delta, and you were just trained from birth that you were happy. And it would be awful if you had to take on all the responsibilities that those gammas did, because they had to work so hard. You got to just do your job and hang out with people that were like you, and then get off and get high and be entertained, and this went on. And anyway,
Yeah.
it's terrifying because when Buck Huxley wrote Brave New World, there's been a lot of debate on this subject, but I'm persuaded that Huxley actually thought this.
I've heard that he wrote things after that, talking about how terrible an idea it was. Like how he kind of, after he wrote it and seeing sort of the general mass people react to it, he was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I see how this would be bad.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't have any attribution for, all that speculation. I know that in any case, it's definitely worth a read because it's one of those often referred to stories.
yeah, absolutely. So here we are. The world is pretty terrible. I think we have a pretty clear picture of who the villain is and what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
They're trying to get humanity to give up, get humanity to do themselves in, destroy themselves.
And do you think it's probably self-preservation that they just don't want further incursions into their, I'm going to call it their lair?
I would say no. I'd say it's like there's three parties, right?
Right.
There's the party that's like, we're going to go and find new places. There's the party that's like, I want to protect what I have. And then there's the party that's like, I would be part of the second party, but I can see the ones over there planning to destroy those other places. And so I'm going to go to those other places to try and stop, hinder,
Yeah.
That's where Gloves is.
Yeah.
Gloves is not just trying to flee, and wants people to stop, but is more so there because Top Hat has kind of made his plans very clear.
Right.
Any other world building stuff you guys have? Any other ideas?
I think that's pretty rounded for what, the different elements presented at the moment.
Great. Well, we will come back next week and with some new fresh story elements and new fresh brains and try to turn a positive light out of what's admittedly a terrible situation.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. If you like this episode, please let us know. Add us on Twitter at @GetsBettercast. Send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. Tell us your cool ideas. Tell us your interesting takes on this story or any other story we have. We'd love to hear it. And until next time, just wait. It gets better.